Mike Harris back with What in the Law podcast. And as I'm getting more people to watch me who may be in different places, I think I need to take a moment to talk about the differences that can happen based on where you are. One of the first questions anyone has when they are accused of an offense is, what am I looking at? But before that can be answered, you have to know, where are you? There can be very different rules and laws from state to state. Within each state, you could have a case in different types of municipal courts with different rules, or you could be in a federal court. And for the most part, the basic principles are more or less the same as far as what is or what is not illegal. It's not illegal to steal anywhere. And the differences can be on the level of offense, what the maximum sentence you're looking at, or the minimum sentence, whether something is a felony or a misdemeanor, and certainly different procedural rules. But with one big exception, which I'll talk about at the end, what is illegal and what is not illegal is more or less the same. For example, we'll talk about murder. Guess what? That's illegal everywhere. But what kind of murder and what you're looking at can differ. There's different types of murder. There, for example, is normally the worst kind, premeditated murder. There might be not premeditated, but still intentional. Or you knew what you were doing. There's something lesser, where it could be called a high degree of recklessness, where you're doing something so outrageous that you should have known that someone would die. Sometimes that's called depraved heart murder. Or you might have something little less than that, where someone is having a willful and wanton disregard for their actions, and it's a reckless conduct, and it might be considered something like a manslaughter. So there's very different breakdowns of these type of offenses. Some states have up to 4 levels of murder and different levels of homicides and manslaughters. And whether you're looking at a certain penalty, a felony or a misdemeanor, can vary very differently based on where you are. A perhaps more practical example for hopefully most of you who are not out committing any sort of homicide would be a careless driving. In most parts of the country, careless driving is punishable by a ticket. You get a fine, points on your license, you might have to do driving school to keep your license, but you can't go to jail. Colorado is actually unique in that regard, where careless driving is actually a misdemeanor offense, punishable potentially by jail. If there's not even an accident, it's punishable by 90 days in Colorado. And if there is an accident and someone even has a minor injury, you have a maximum punishment of 1 year in jail. Now, just because that's the maximum penalty doesn't mean it happens. In fact, I've only heard of jail in a careless driving case under 2 circumstances. One of being a death involved in the case, and the second being someone was ordered to do some sort of probation condition and violated their conditions that they were required to do. But that's just an example of how different things can be. Now I'm going to give another example of how many courts you could potentially end up in for one particular offense. And for this example, let's say you are active duty in the military on a military base, and that you drive recklessly and you cause an accident and you hurt somebody. You could potentially be in up to 7 different courts for that one action. First, you have to deal with the criminal offense of reckless driving. And that could potentially be in 4 different courts. if this military base happened to be in city limits, you might find yourself in a municipal court. Or you might find yourself in the regular county court that most criminal offenses within a state would go to. But you're on a military base. That's federal jurisdiction. You could be going to federal court. And I also mentioned, in this scenario, let's say the person's active duty. You could be going to a military court, either through a non-judicial punishment or Article 15 proceeding, or technically through a court-martial. Which one sometimes can almost seem random and can vary with the policies of the day. But that's 4 courts right there that you could potentially end up in. But there's more. Let's say you have a security clearance. You might find yourself in a court hearing about your security clearance. And in my scenario, there was an accident and someone was injured. You might be sued for money. And that could either be within the state court, in the county or district court and state, or if persons maybe from another state than you might sue you in federal court. So you could end up in up to 7 different courts for one action. And doesn't mean you really will, but that's the potential and how different you could have with different rules and different procedures. Now, I mentioned that more or less what is illegal one place is going to be illegal somewhere else. But there is one big exception, and that's coming soon and actually has already started. It's called abortion. Some states it's going to be illegal, in some states it's not. And who is going to be prosecuted and how bad are they going to be prosecuted is going to vary. There's already a reported case out of Nebraska where someone is being prosecuted for having an abortion. And we've seen in Florida, the governor just suspended a district attorney for refusing to prosecute people for abortions. And there's going to be other states like Colorado that are going to potentially be taking in people almost like refugees from these states. And how bad and how different things will be and what courts are going to say is going to really be decided in the future and could potentially change again based on who wins an election, as there are people on both sides of the issue who are talking about making national legislation for one side or the other. So that's a bit of an overview of how things can vary so much from one place to another. And frankly, it can be very difficult and overwhelming, and that's why if you are facing some situation, you need to have someone who is qualified not only in the type of case, but in the area and jurisdiction and knows what they're doing based on the rules where they're going. So, see you next time. Give me a like, subscribe, and check out What in the Law podcast.